It was the kind of evening where everything seemed to hold its breath, as if the world itself was waiting for a revelation. I had always believed that our relationship, forged over 5 years of shared dreams and whispered secrets, was unbreakable. But as I pushed open the door to our apartment, the weight of that belief shattered into a million pieces, each fragment a testament to the lies and deceit that had quietly, insidiously taken root. The sound of laughter, foreign and light-hearted, drifted through the hallway. I froze, my hand gripping the door handle as if it were a lifeline. I had grown accustomed to hearing her laughter, but tonight, there was a dissonance to it, an edge of something unmistakably wrong. I stepped forward, my heart pounding in sync with my footsteps. As I rounded the corner, the sight before me was so surreal it felt like I was watching a movie from which I was forever excluded. There she was, Emily, my Emily, tangled in the arms of another man on our living room couch. Her face, usually so serene and composed, was flushed with an emotion I couldn't quite place. And the man. His features were unfamiliar, but his presence was brazenly intimate. Emily, I managed to choke out, the name coming out more as a wounded cry than a declaration. Time seemed to collapse in on itself. The man scrambled off the couch, his face a mask of guilt and surprise. Emily, on the other hand, looked as if she had been struck by lightning, her eyes wide and brimming with shock. John, Her voice was a strangled whisper, a poor attempt at explanation that dissolved into the heavy silence that followed. For a moment, I stood there, rooted to the spot, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what I was witnessing. The life we had built together, the plans we had made, all seemed to dissolve before my eyes. I was a spectator to my own heartbreak. Emily stood up, her movements jerky, and walked toward me with an unsteady gait. "Please, let me explain," she pleaded, her voice breaking. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal, but beneath it all, a painful part of me wanted to hear her out. Despite everything, I still loved her. It was that love that compelled me to stay rooted in place, waiting for the explanation that felt like it would never come. Emily sat down on the edge of the couch, her face buried in her hands. The man, whose name I would later learn was Jake, had fled the scene, leaving us in a heavy silence. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. I could barely breathe, my mind racing through a haze of emotions and unanswered questions. "I don't know where to start," Emily said, her voice muffled by her hands. She looked up, her eyes red and pleading. "I never meant for this to happen." "Never meant for this to happen?" I echoed, incredulous. "Emily, how could you not mean for this to happen? We were supposed to be building a future together." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I know. And I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake, and it's all my fault. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you until it was too late." Her words were desperate, almost frantic, but they lacked the conviction I needed to believe them. I wanted to see remorse, not just hear about it. I needed to understand why she had strayed, why the trust between us had been so easily shattered. "It was a moment of weakness," she continued, her voice trembling. "Jake and I met at work. We were just friends at first, but things got complicated. I didn't know how to stop it. I was afraid of losing you if I told you what was happening." "Afraid of losing me?" I repeated, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Is that why you kept it a secret? Because you thought you could manage it on your own?" "Yes," she admitted, her shoulders sagging in defeat. "I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep everything under control, but I was wrong. I'm so sorry, John." The apology was coming too late. Every word she spoke seemed to dig the knife deeper into the wound. I wanted to believe her, to find a way to reconcile the Emily I knew with the one who had betrayed me. But it was like trying to piece together a shattered mirror. No matter how hard you try, the cracks remain. "I need time," I said finally, my voice cold and distant. "I can't just forgive you right now. I need to figure out what this means for us." Emily's face fell, but she nodded, understanding the gravity of my words. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'll give you all the time you need. I just hope—" Her voice broke and she couldn't finish the sentence. I watched her, feeling an overwhelming mixture of pity and anger. The future that had seemed so bright now felt uncertain, tainted by the shadows of betrayal. As I turned and walked toward the door, I glanced back one last time. Emily was still on the couch, her figure small and crumpled. The apartment, once filled with love and laughter, now seemed like a distant memory. I stepped out into the cool night air, carrying with me the weight of a broken heart and the beginning of a journey I hadn't expected to take. Days passed in a blur of confusion and heartache. The apartment, once a space of comfort and shared dreams, felt hollow and unwelcoming. I avoided it as much as possible, spending time with friends and family, trying to drown out the incessant questions that haunted me. Emily's attempts to reach out were persistent but respectful. She left messages and sent texts, each one more desperate than the last, pleading for a chance to explain, to make amends. I read them, each one a stab to my already aching heart. I couldn't bring myself to respond, not yet. My emotions were still too raw, my mind too clouded with anger and betrayal. One evening, as I sat in a quiet cafe, my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. It was a simple request for a meeting, a chance to talk face to face, away from the confines of the apartment where everything had unraveled. After much deliberation, I agreed. Part of me needed closure, while another part of me wanted to see if there was any chance of salvaging what we had. The cafe was quaint, with soft lighting and a soothing atmosphere. Emily was already seated at a corner table when I arrived. She looked up as I approached, her eyes a mix of hope and apprehension. The sight of her, looking so vulnerable, stirred a pang of guilt within me. I had loved her once, and seeing her now, so broken, was almost unbearable. "Thank you for coming," Emily said, her voice trembling. She reached for my hand across the table, but I withdrew it. I wasn't ready for physical contact, not yet. "I'm here," I said curtly, "but I need to understand why this happened. What led you to betray everything we had?" Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "It wasn't just one thing. It was a series of mistakes, misunderstandings, and my own insecurities. I was unhappy, and instead of addressing it with you, I sought comfort elsewhere. It was wrong, and I regret it more than I can say." Her words were raw, and I could see the genuine remorse in her eyes. But remorse alone wasn't enough to heal the deep wound. I needed to understand more, to find some semblance of closure before I could even consider moving forward. "I've been reflecting on our relationship too," Emily continued. "I realize now that I neglected the things that were important to you. I took you for granted and allowed my fears to cloud my judgment." It was hard to hear, but I could see the effort she was making to be honest. "What do you want from this conversation?" I asked. "Are you hoping for forgiveness, for us to get back together?" Emily's face crumpled and she looked down, her hands wringing together. "I don't expect forgiveness right away. I know it's something I have to earn, if at all. I just want you to know that I am truly sorry and that I am willing to do whatever it takes to make amends, if you can find it in your heart to give me another chance." Her plea hung in the air, heavy and charged. I needed time to process it all. "I appreciate your honesty," I said finally, "but I need more time to think. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I need to figure it out on my own." Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand. Just know that I'm here, willing to do whatever it takes if you decide you want to try." I left the cafe feeling emotionally drained. The conversation had been cathartic, but it also left me with more questions than answers. I had to navigate through this storm of emotions, unsure of where it would lead. Weeks passed, and the healing process began, though it was slow and painful. I sought solace in familiar routines and supportive friends, attempting to rebuild my life from the fragments left behind. Emily's calls and messages became less frequent, but she respected my need for space. It was a small comfort amidst the turmoil. One day, as I was going through some old photos and mementos from our relationship, I found a letter Emily had written me years ago. It was filled with promises and dreams we had once shared. Reading it stirred a whirlwind of emotions, making me question whether it was possible to reconcile the past with the present. In the midst of this emotional chaos, I found myself at a crossroads. I had to decide whether to close the chapter on our relationship or to explore the possibility of rebuilding it. It was a choice between holding on to the comfort of what once was or venturing into the unknown, risking further heartbreak. One evening, I met up with a close friend, Sarah, who had been a constant source of support. We sat in a park, the gentle evening breeze carrying away some of the heaviness that had settled in my heart. "I don't know what to do," I confessed, my voice cracking. "Emily has reached out and expressed her regret, but I'm struggling to see past the hurt. Part of me wants to forgive and try again, but another part of me is terrified of being hurt again." Sarah listened attentively, her presence calming. "It's understandable to feel that way," she said softly. "Forgiveness is a process, and it's okay to take your time. You have to listen to your heart and do what feels right for you. Sometimes, it's not about whether you can forgive someone, but whether you can forgive yourself for allowing them to hurt you." Her words resonated deeply. I realized that the decision I faced wasn't just about Emily, but also about my own healing and future. It was about finding peace within myself and deciding what kind of life I wanted to lead. I decided to take a step back and evaluate my own needs and desires before making any final decisions. I began to focus on self-care and personal growth, allowing myself the space to heal and rediscover who I was outside of the relationship. Months had passed since that fateful day, and the wounds from the betrayal had slowly begun to heal. I had used the time to focus on my own growth and reflection, finding solace in new experiences and rebuilding my sense of self. The pain had faded, replaced by a cautious optimism about the future. One day, as I walked through the park where Sarah and I had talked, I saw Emily sitting on a bench, her posture reflecting a quiet grace and acceptance. Our paths had crossed in a way that felt almost serendipitous, and I felt a pang of recognition mixed with curiosity. I approached her, feeling a mixture of nervousness and resolve. "Emily," I said, taking a seat beside her. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine with a blend of hope and trepidation. "John," she said softly, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began, trying to steady my voice. "And I think it's time for us to have one last conversation, to see where we stand and to find closure." Emily nodded, her expression reflecting both relief and apprehension. "I'm ready to talk, John. I've been working on myself, too, and I want to be honest about where I am and what I've learned." As we spoke, we revisited old memories, shared our personal growth, and discussed the future with a newfound clarity. Emily spoke of her journey toward understanding her own shortcomings and the steps she had taken to address them. I shared my own path to healing and self-discovery. We both recognized that while our past held valuable lessons, it was time to acknowledge that our lives had evolved in different directions. The pain of betrayal had given way to a more profound understanding of ourselves and each other. We had both grown, but not necessarily together. "Maybe our paths were meant to diverge," Emily said, her voice tinged with sadness but also acceptance. "And maybe that's okay. I'm grateful for the time we had and the lessons we learned, but I understand if we need to move forward separately." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure. "I agree. We've both changed, and while it's painful to let go, it's also liberating. I'm thankful for the good times we shared and for the growth we've both experienced." We parted ways with a sense of peace, each embarking on our own journey. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was a path we would walk with a renewed sense of self and hope for the future. Our relationship had come to an end, but it had left us both better equipped to embrace the next chapter of our lives with grace and understanding. As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure and optimism. The heartbreak of the past had paved the way for a new beginning, one where I could build a future grounded in self-awareness and hope.